They gave me a standing ovation, not knowing I was already dead. The applause rang hollow in my ears. It echoed off glass walls and high ceilings, bounced over the glossy black floors, and ricocheted through the conference hall like a cruel joke. Cameras flashed. Someone whistled. Another called out my name. I stood frozen in the center of the stage, smile plastered across my face, arms loose at my sides like a doll whose strings had just been cut. I had done it. My pitch was perfect. The merger was sealed. My code, my idea, was now the backbone of a $40 million expansion. So why did it feel like poison was blooming inside my chest? From the corner of my vision, I spotted them. Lynn stood near the espresso bar, legs crossed, arms folded, lips curled into the same razor-sharp smirk she'd worn the day she forwarded my prototype to the board without my name on it. Perfect hair, perfect lipstick, perfect betrayal. Next to her, Layla, glossy and composed in her white pencil skirt, sipped from a champagne flute, eyes narrowed behind her oversized glasses. She was laughing, as if this entire thing hadn't been a war she tried to bury me in. And then there was Grant, my ex-manager, the man who once told me, "Your job is to support vision, not create it." He stood with one hand on the CEO's shoulder, the other casually tucked into his jacket pocket, already taking credit. They were the only ones not clapping. The adrenaline wore off like water draining from a bathtub. Suddenly, I was ice cold. My knees locked, and then buckled slightly. The lights above buzzed like angry insects. My mouth was dry. Too dry. Something's wrong. I smiled wider. "Thank you," I said into the mic, my voice faint, distant, as though someone else were speaking. "Let's build the future. Together." The crowd roared. And then I saw him. Louis, leaning against the back wall, watching. He wasn't clapping either, not yet. His expression unreadable. Reserved. But his eyes, they were locked on me, studying, seeing something no one else did. It hit like a freight train. Not the heart attack. That came seconds later. But the thought. He sees me. Too late. But he sees me. My fingers trembled around the mic. I blinked. The room shimmered. The air turned thick, soupy, like I was breathing through cloth. Pain stabbed through my chest. Sharp, hot, and radiating. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Someone in the front row looked concerned. My heels slipped slightly on the polished floor. My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped animal. My legs gave out. Gasps. A scream. Someone yelled for help. I collapsed, not with grace, not with any of the dignity I'd spent years clawing toward, but hard, awkwardly onto the stage floor. My cheek hit the cool metal trim of the stage. My eyes rolled back, and I could still hear the applause. It's strange what you remember in your final moments. I remembered the lunch I skipped. I remembered the coffee Lynn had handed me that morning. Caramel macchiato, too sweet, like always. I drank it anyway. I remembered the meeting 2 years ago when she hugged me after I got promoted, whispered, "I always knew you'd make it." And I remembered how she'd been the one to accidentally CC the board on my incomplete spec. The one they later used to call me unreliable. And I remembered Louis, not the cold, unreadable Louis standing in the back of the room, but the one from 3 months ago. The one who stopped by my desk late one night, stared at the code on my screen, and said in a voice barely audible, "If I were you, I'd patent this. Today, I didn't." I trusted them. I trusted all of them. Foolish, foolish Tess. My lungs stopped working. I tried to inhale and got nothing. I felt pressure, like a fist pushing down on my chest. Then nothing at all. Just a quiet kind of floating. No noise. No pain. Just release. And one final thought. They didn't forgive me for succeeding. And I never forgave myself for letting them. I don't know how long the darkness lasted. A moment? A year? But when I woke up, it wasn't to the sounds of sirens or beeping monitors or cold metal gurneys. It was to the sound of my old alarm clock, the one with the cracked plastic and the stupid cat-shaped snooze button. I blinked. White ceiling, faded posters on the wall, a crooked IKEA lamp, my old internship ID badge on the dresser. I sat up slowly. My body, smaller, lighter. My hands, no calluses. My skin, no wrinkles. My hair, longer. And the date. My gaze snapped to the calendar on the wall. June 12th. My first day at Veritas. 23 years old. Right before everything began. Before Lynn. Before Layla. Before Louis. Before the idea that would make me and break me. I stared at the ID badge. Tess Morgan, UX intern. Veritas Systems, my pulse pounded in my ears. I should have screamed. I should have panicked. Instead, I laughed. Low. Hysterical. Disbelieving. And then I whispered, okay. Let's do it again. But this time, my way. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before I dared to move. The cheap white paint had a hairline crack running across it, something I hadn't seen in over a decade. My bed creaked when I shifted, the mattress lumpy, the blanket too thin. There was a faint smell of instant ramen and dust in the air. And then there was the sound, the muffled buzz of the old streetcar outside my window. I hadn't heard that in years. I sat up too fast and immediately regretted it. The room tilted, but only slightly. My heart was beating so loud it echoed in my ribs. I wasn't dead. Or maybe I was. But either way, I wasn't 35 anymore. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. My knees looked young. No bruises from bar workouts. No faint scar from when I tripped over a server rack during an all-nighter. My hands were smaller. My nails were bitten to the quick, a habit I'd kicked 10 years ago. The calendar on the wall mocked me in cheap blue ink. June 12th. I knew that date like it was tattooed on the inside of my eyelids. My first day at Veritas. The start of everything. My career, my rise, and eventually my downfall. I stood up and looked around the room. Every poster, every thrift store chair, every cracked screen on my secondhand tablet. It was all exactly as I remembered. Down to the blinking router light that never worked right. I wasn't dreaming. Or if I was, it was the most detailed, cruelly nostalgic dream I'd ever had. I touched the ID badge on my dresser. Tess Morgan, UX intern. Veritas Systems. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I took a breath. Then another. The panic was there, rising in my throat like static, but I forced it down. This was real. Or real enough. And if I only had a day, or a week, I would use every second of it. Because this time, I knew things. I knew who would smile to my face and stab me with a spreadsheet. I knew which hallway conversation would lead to sabotage. I knew which man would ignore me. Until it was too late. And I knew how to stop all of it. The Veritas Systems building looked the same, a giant glass rectangle pretending to be a spaceship. Open plan, over-designed, and desperately trying to look like Google's cooler cousin. Inside, desks were cluttered with energy drinks and half-finished prototypes. One guy was sleeping under a beanbag. Another was coding with noise-canceling headphones and a hoodie that said IEAT Stack Overflow for breakfast. Chaos. Controlled, caffeinated chaos. The elevator opened on the 5th floor. UX and product innovation. That's where it all began. I stepped out and caught my reflection in the glass wall beside the conference room. My hair was in a high ponytail. My blouse was one size too big. My shoes were flats I bought for $9 at a clearance store. I looked like exactly what I had been. A smart, terrified girl trying to play at being a professional. But inside? Inside, I was a woman who had already bled for this place. Tess Morgan? A voice called from the left. I turned. A familiar face. Julia. The office manager. Late 30s. Hyper-competent. A little too friendly. The one who'd once told me HR likes to see smiles, even when you're dying inside. Right on time, she said, handing me a welcome folder. Orientation is at 10, but first let me introduce you to the team. You'll be shadowing Louis today. My stomach flipped. Already? Louis? I repeated, too quickly. Julia smiled like she'd just handed me a lottery ticket and a live grenade. Oh yeah. You're lucky. He never takes interns. He was standing by the whiteboard wall, scribbling equations that looked more like alien glyphs than human thought. Black t-shirt, black jeans, black coffee in a black mug with no logo. Louis Alvarez. In this version of the timeline, he didn't know me. Not yet. Not the way he would later. Not the way he had, in the other life, the broken one. He turned slowly when Julia cleared her throat. This is Tess, she chirped. UX intern. You're her point today. He looked at me. Really looked. Dark eyes. Sharp cheekbones. Absolutely no trace of a smile. Fine, he said, then turned back to the wall. Julia gave me a wink and a pat on the shoulder like I was heading into battle. Then she left me with the human monolith. I stepped closer, heart thumping. I'm good with UI systems and wireframes, I offered. He didn't answer. And, Figma. Sketch. Prototype. Also Illustrator, but it crashes if you breathe too hard. Still nothing. He capped the marker, finally, and turned to face me fully. Where did you study? Stanford. Human-computer interaction, I replied, instantly. He nodded. We'll see if that means anything. And with that, he walked off, leaving me scrambling to catch up. The rest of the day was a blur of design audits, systems tests, and awkward silences. Louis wasn't mean. He just didn't fill space. At all. He pointed at things. Grunted approval or disapproval. Typed like his fingers were precision tools. But I watched him. Closely. In my old life, Louis had been a mystery I never solved. A shadow in the hallway. A voice in the Slack channel. And then, one day, a hand on my back when I cried in the bathroom after a board meeting destroyed me. Now, I had the chance to meet him before all of it. And I wasn't going to waste it. Around 4 p.m., as I was reorganizing a confusing section of the prototype dashboard, he suddenly asked, "Why did you choose this industry?" I blinked. He hadn't spoken in 2 hours. I looked at him, and for once, I told the truth. Because I wanted to build something no one could take away. He held my gaze for a second longer than I expected. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. And then he nodded. Good. Tess? Oh my God, you're here? I turned toward the voice slowly, already bracing. Lynn. Same perfect teeth. Same effortless waves in her honey blonde hair. Same voice, just breathy enough to sound excited, but not too loud to seem desperate. She wore a crisp cream blazer that said, "I didn't try too hard but still outrank you," and heels sharp enough to draw blood. If snakes wore Louboutins, they'd look like Lynn. She opened her arms like she was greeting an old college roommate and pulled me into a hug before I could dodge. "I had no idea you were starting today," she chirped, stepping back and squeezing my arms with both hands. "You're going to love it here." "It's a little crazy, but in the best way." I smiled. Not a real one. Just the kind you use when the party host hands you a drink that smells like battery acid, and you have no escape route. "Yeah," I said. "So far it's been eye-opening." She didn't catch the edge in my voice. Or maybe she did and chose to ignore it. "Let me know if you ever need anything," she added. "Seriously. We girls have to stick together." Girls? Not women? I felt the corner of my mouth twitch, but kept it steady. "Oh, totally," I said sweetly. "Like we did at Stanford." Her smile faltered, just for a flicker of a second, before snapping back into place. "You remember that group project?" she said quickly. "You were so intense. You stole my wireframes. You presented them as your own. Then you cried when I told the professor and somehow made me look like the jealous one." "I learned a lot from you," I said, letting the words stretch just long enough to feel like a double-edged compliment. She laughed again, too brightly this time. "We should get coffee sometime this week. Catch up." "I'd like that." I lied. And just like that, the trap began. Orientation was held in one of the glass-walled conference rooms with a wonky projector and broken speaker. Layla, the head of HR, stood in front of the group, all white blazer and red lipstick, holding a wireless clicker like it was a weapon. She was beautiful in a threatening, airbrushed kind of way. Everything about her was calculated. The expensive perfume, the surgically precise smile, the way she shifted her weight subtly when Louis walked into the room midway through. "Veritas isn't just a company," she was saying. "It's an ecosystem of innovation, and you are its future." Kill me, I thought. Or better yet, kill the script you've repeated every Monday for 10 years. Layla's eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on me, they narrowed. Just barely. "Of course," she added, "some interns need a little more guidance than others. That's why we pair them with our senior team, some of our brightest minds." Her eyes flicked toward Louis, who had seated himself in the back corner, already flipping through a design draft like the presentation didn't exist. I felt the heat of her passive aggression settle over me like a damp coat. "Subtle, Layla. Real subtle." I smiled and raised my hand like a student. Will our ideas be credited if they're implemented during our internship, or do they become company property by default? That earned a few nervous glances. Someone coughed. Louis looked up. Layla's smile stiffened. Everything you create here is part of Veritas, she said smoothly. We believe in collaboration, not ownership. I nodded, overly sincere. Thanks for clarifying. I just like knowing where I stand. After orientation, I pulled Lynn aside by the kitchenette, a too-bright corner with a leaking fridge and a Keurig that whined like it had PTSD. I had this idea last night, I said casually. Rough, but maybe it has legs. You know the onboarding dashboard? What if we introduced an adaptive layout that shifts based on user role and behavior pattern? Her eyes lit up. Hook, line, sinker. That's actually really smart, she said, trying not to sound too impressed. You should pitch that. Oh, it's just a sketch, I said quickly. Nothing solid yet. I'll probably wait. She touched my arm. Seriously, that's the kind of thing leadership loves. You should talk to Layla. Maybe, I said with a shrug. Or I'll just see what people think in the Slack channel. I posted the idea that afternoon, vague enough to be undeveloped, enticing enough to be valuable. And right on cue, 20 minutes later, Lynn reposted it. With a few tweaks, as her own. I stared at the screen, letting the satisfaction settle into my chest like warm tea. Same old Lynn. Like clockwork. The best part? I'd embedded a little tracking code into the mock-up she copied. A subtle digital fingerprint that would trace the origin right back to my laptop. Not illegal, not even malicious. Just informative. Louis pinged me 30 minutes later. Louis A., did you post the onboarding concept in 2UX ideas? I hesitated. Then typed, Tess M. I did. Why? No response. But across the room, I saw him glance toward me. Just once. Not suspicious. Not annoyed. Curious. And maybe, just maybe, a little impressed. By 5 p.m., Lynn was being congratulated by Julia for thinking outside the box. I just smiled and sipped my tea. Because this wasn't about revenge. Not really. This was about control. Last time, I trusted too fast. Gave too much. Played too nice. This time I was watching, waiting, playing dumb if needed, but never being dumb. And I would take them all by surprise. Even him. Even Louis. Because if I'd learned anything from dying, it was this. Success isn't just about being brilliant. It's about knowing exactly when to strike, and exactly who's watching when you do. Move that to the left, Louis said without looking up. I moved it to the right, just to see if he'd notice. He did. That's right, he added a beat later, and I could feel the corner of his mouth threatening to smirk. But it didn't. Instead, he leaned over my shoulder to adjust a node in the prototype map. His hand didn't touch me, but the heat of his presence hit like a pulse of static. Close. Focused. Not invasive, just intense. I kept my eyes on the screen. This was our third day working together. Some deep dive UX redesign they dumped on him with no warning and no support. Lucky for me, I was the support now. He still didn't say much. But he no longer ignored me. And when I spoke, he actually listened. Even when his eyes were on the screen. That was more than I could say for half the men I'd worked with in my last life. This flow doesn't make sense, I muttered, dragging a wireframe off the main screen and into the trash bin. If we force users through the tour first, we'll lose half of them before they see the dashboard. He nodded. So change it. Just like that. No ego. No lectures. Just logic. I exhaled slowly. You're not like the others. That got his attention. What does that mean? Nothing bad, I said quickly. Just, you don't talk to hear yourself. It's rare. Louis tilted his head, studying me the way you might study a puzzle with one strange, familiar piece. You're not like the others either, he said. I swallowed. Because I actually do the work? He shrugged. Because you anticipate it. By 8:30 p.m., the office was nearly empty. Veritas at night was a different beast, quieter, less performative. Gone were the bursts of forced collaboration and half-loud startup jokes. All that remained was soft humming from exposed vents and the gentle clack of keys. Louis and I were still in the war room, a glass box of a meeting space with dimming lights and too many whiteboards. Our laptops cast a pale glow over the table, reflecting faintly on the walls like ghostly halos. I reached for the last remaining granola bar from the snack cart and offered it wordlessly. He took it. He always took things without question, like he trusted the action more than the offer. "You don't eat enough," I said without thinking. He paused, mid-bite. "Excuse me?" I blinked. "Too late. I scrambled. You've been working 12 hours straight. You didn't eat lunch." Louis raised an eyebrow. "You've been watching?" "I notice things," I said, then added quickly, not in a weird way, just pattern recognition. "UX stuff." He leaned back slightly, eyes still on me. "So what else do you notice?" "Your tells. The way you tap your pen when someone's wrong, but you're too polite to say it. The way your shoulders relax when you solve something no one else could. The way you used to look at me, in that other life. Like you knew me before I ever said a word." I cleared my throat. "You fidget with your ring finger when you're stressed," I said lightly. "But you don't wear a ring. So I guess, commitment issues?" Louis gave a short, surprised laugh. "Psych profile over granola." "Nice." The silence between us shifted, warmer now. We turned back to the screen. The prototype was coming together, smoother, smarter, clearer. It felt alive, like something real. I loved this part. The building. "Why Veritas?" he asked suddenly, voice low. I blinked at the question. "What do you mean?" "You're overqualified," he said plainly. "Stanford, published papers, freelance experience." "So why here?" I stared at the cursor blinking on the mock-up. "Because I thought this place could be a home. Because I thought people here would have my back. Because I believed in the mission. Until they gutted it. Until they gutted me. I had a feeling," I said finally, "that something important would happen here." Louis didn't respond right away, but his gaze didn't leave mine. "You talk like you've already lived through this." My breath caught. I fumbled. "Isn't that how it always feels, with déjà vu?" He nodded slowly, but his eyes were too sharp, too focused. He knew I wasn't just talking nonsense. He didn't know what, exactly, I was hiding, but the tension between us had changed, like he'd stepped one foot across a threshold I didn't realize was open. Just after 9 p.m., the lights flickered once, then went out entirely. "Seriously?" I muttered, stretching to reach the wall switch. Did no one tell facilities were still working? Louis didn't move. "We're on motion sensors," he said. "They shut off after 15 minutes of stillness." "Well, that's a design flaw. Or a challenge," he countered. The glow of our laptops was the only illumination left. It bathed the room in a soft, bluish hue. Outside the glass walls, the office was shadowy, empty, the kind of quiet that made even keyboards sound loud. We were alone. Really alone. "You know," I said after a pause, "you once told me something." Louis looked up from his screen. "You said, smart people don't talk about potential. They just prove it." His brows drew together. "I said that?" I nodded. "A while ago." He leaned back in his chair, studied me again. "You talk like we've had this conversation before." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but kept my expression calm. "Maybe we will." He didn't laugh. He didn't smirk. He just stared. And then, just for a second, he smiled. Barely, but it was there. And it felt like victory. He found me by the espresso machine. Not that I was looking for him, but the moment he stepped into the office, everything slowed down just enough for me to notice. Owen Langford, venture capitalist, charismatic shark in a three-piece suit, the kind of man who could spot a unicorn startup at 20 paces, or kill one just as fast. He wasn't from my department. He wasn't even in the company, but he walked through the Veritas office like it already belonged to him. "Are you Tess?" he asked, flashing a smile that had probably closed $100 million deals. "I might be," I said, lifting my coffee. "You've stirred up some interesting waves," he said, looking me over like I was a product, but an expensive one. UX intern who thinks like a founder. That's not easy to ignore. I tilted my head. "Then, I guess I'm doing something right." He grinned. "I like you already." By noon, I was sitting across from him at a corner table in a restaurant that had its own private elevator. It was one of those absurd rooftop places where they serve lunch on matte black plates and call it an experience. I hadn't meant to say yes, But when someone with that kind of power and interest comes knocking, especially when you know the game, you don't slam the door, you open it just enough. I did a little digging, Owen said, swirling his wine like it was habit. You've got an interesting background. That sounds vaguely threatening, I replied, cutting into something that looked like salmon but tasted like butter and sin. He chuckled. Not at all. Stanford, 2 startup internships, some freelance work with interface design, and then, poof, you vanish for a while. I took a sip of water. Maybe I was waiting for the right opportunity. Well, if Veritas doesn't see what they've got, I do. He leaned forward. You're sharp. You ask the right questions. You clearly don't scare easily. And you see the angles. That's rare. I blinked slowly. In the last life, you came to me a year from now. After everything crashed. You offered me an escape. A chance to start over. I almost said yes. He gave me the same smile now. The same spark of promise. Whatever your trajectory is here, he said, I'm offering you a shortcut. My firm has a new division. Think early stage, flexible, agile. You'd be running your own UX team. Real stake. Real credit. And you just happened to recruit interns over lunch? I asked, feigning lightness. Just the extraordinary ones, he said. Back at Veritas, the elevator was slow, too slow. Louis stepped in just as the doors started to close. His timing, as always, was unnervingly perfect. He didn't speak at first, just stood across from me, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. The elevator hummed. The soft jazz music made the silence even louder. Finally, he said, You had lunch with Langford. It wasn't a question. Wow. News travels fast. He's not here for lunch. I raised a brow. Jealous? His head snapped toward me, eyes sharp. Careful. My heart stuttered, not from fear but from how direct he was, and how much it reminded me of the version of him that once held me up when everything fell apart. He offered you something, Louis continued, voice quieter now. Didn't he? Yes, I said. But I didn't take it. You shouldn't, he said. Why not? Because he's not who he pretends to be, Louis said. He doesn't back people. He uses them. Then replaces them. I looked at him, trying to read between the lines. Why do you care? I asked. His jaw tensed. Because you're better than that. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. He didn't move. Neither did I. Next time, he said, voice low, if someone wants to invest in you, make sure it's not just to say they own you. And then he stepped out. The rest of the afternoon felt unsettled. I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard, replaying the conversation with Owen, then the one with Louis. I could still hear his voice, that rough edge underneath the calm. In another life, I would have ignored it. I would have gone to Owen. I would have believed the promise of being seen. And maybe I still wanted to. Because part of me, the broken, still aching part, wanted out. Of Veritas. Of politics. Of watching my back. But this time, I wasn't the same woman. And I wasn't here to run. Later that evening, Owen messaged me. Owen L., great lunch. Think about my offer. You deserve more than playing support. Let me know when you're ready to do something real. I stared at the message for a long time. Then minimized the window. If I had left last time, would I be happier now? Would I have built something better, faster, cleaner? Maybe. But I wouldn't have learned, and I wouldn't be here, now, on the inside of the storm, learning how to control the weather. The room was colder than it should have been. A slick, glass-walled boardroom with frosted logos, 12 leather chairs, and a curved screen behind the podium. Someone had laid out bottles of still water, perfectly aligned like soldiers. I stood near the front, my palms flat on the cool metal table, trying not to feel the tremor in my fingertips. This was the room where they took everything from me. Last time I came in here full of excitement, with a prototype that was new, raw, but brilliant. I shared it too soon, trusted too easily, and they gutted me in front of everyone. This time, I was prepared. Patent filed. Timestamps secure. Cloud storage encrypted. Presentation rehearsed to the second. And still, the ghosts were loud. Lynn walked in 5 minutes before the start, looking like she owned the building. Her blouse was silk. Her heels were taller than usual. Her smile was too wide. She leaned in with faux concern. Nervous? No, I said. Just ready. She gave a low chuckle. Well, fingers crossed. The board can be intense. Especially when you're new. I smiled at her like a knife. Good thing I'm not new. Across the room, Layla entered with 2 junior managers in tow. She didn't look at me, but I saw the flash of recognition when she caught sight of my name on the presenter's screen. Her expression tightened, just barely. She hadn't expected me to lead the pitch. Good. Let them underestimate me one more time. I stepped up to the podium at exactly 10 a.m. Louis was already seated at the far end of the table, arms crossed, face unreadable. He hadn't spoken to me since the elevator, but his presence, steady, sharp, and undeniable, anchored me. Good morning, I began, voice calm. My name is Tess Morgan. Today I'm presenting a prototype for adaptive onboarding UX, tailored to role-based behavior patterns and optimized through predictive analytics. I clicked to the first slide. Clean, elegant. Mine. The next few minutes passed in a blur of diagrams, flowcharts, live mock-ups, and user data points. I didn't smile. I didn't apologize for being new. I spoke like someone who belonged in the room. Because I did. But halfway through, right as I transitioned to the behavioral mapping demo, the projector glitched. My mock-up flickered, and was replaced by an older version, one I hadn't touched in days. One missing key refinements. I froze. Then saw the file name, onboarding and final v3 and CLM. Lynn. Layla stood at the back of the room, arms folded, saying nothing. But her gaze was sharp, calculating. Lynn's voice chimed from her seat, perfectly timed. I think this is the one we all reviewed last week, right? It seemed a little underbaked. I looked at her, coolly, calmly, because I'd expected this. I'm sorry, I said to the room. Looks like the wrong file was uploaded. I turned toward the projector console and, without flinching, opened the cloud portal. Typed in my credentials. Access the actual build, the one I'd timestamped and saved under restricted permissions. Let's go ahead and use the correct version, I said. The updated interface appeared. Sleeker, smarter, responsive. The room shifted. A few people leaned forward. And just to clarify, I added, this version was uploaded 3 days ago and is registered under my patent submission. Happy to share the metadata if needed. Lynn's face paled. Layla shifted her stance but didn't speak. I continued the pitch. When it was over, there was silence. Then someone clapped. Just once. Louis. He stood up slowly, unfurled his arms and said, without any dramatic flourish, I've reviewed this prototype. It's strong, it's functional, and it's forward-thinking. We'd be foolish not to build on it. Then, and only then, his eyes met mine. I believe in this idea, and I believe in her. The room followed. Applause broke out. The CTO nodded. One of the investors actually whistled. But none of that mattered. Outside the boardroom, Lynn caught up to me in the hall. I didn't leak your file, she said flatly. I raised a brow. Never said you did. You implied it. You implied I wasn't ready, I replied. So I guess we're even. She didn't answer. Just turned and walked away. Layla passed me minutes later. No smile. No condescension. Just a single glance that said, you won this round. But I'm not done. I could live with that. Louis found me by the vending machines later, where I was punching the side of a snack unit that had swallowed my dollar. He didn't say anything at first. Just reached in with a card and swiped for both of us. You're calm, he said finally. Not really, I said. I just hide it better now. A beat of silence. I meant what I said in there, he added. I know. He looked at me then. Really looked, and the corners of his mouth turned up just slightly. It wasn't a big smile, but it was the first one I'd seen from him that felt real. That night, I stood alone in the tiny kitchen of my apartment, barefoot on tile, wine glass in hand, replaying the moment on loop. The pitch, the sabotage, the recovery, and Louis's voice, steady in front of a room full of power. I believe in her. For the first time in both my lives. I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The offer came via email. Of course it did. Subject, let's build something real from Owen Langford. Veritas saw what you created, but not what you are. Here, you'd lead. No politics, no backstabbing, just results. We'll build from scratch. Your vision, your name, your rules. You deserve that much. Let's talk. Oh, I stared at the screen for a long time. If I had read that message in my last life, I would have cried. Not because of the opportunity, but because of the validation I'd never gotten when it mattered. Now I felt nothing but clarity. Louis caught me at 6:07 p.m. just as I was shutting down my laptop. Everyone else had gone home, even Lynn, who now avoided eye contact in the hallway like it might burn her skin. "Walk with me," he said, holding up 2 takeout coffees. No question, just a quiet request. We walked through the park near the office, where spring still clung to the trees like a promise it wasn't ready to break. The air smelled faintly of grass and new leaves, and for a while we didn't talk. Just 2 people in the soft hush of a world that was finally slowing down. "I heard about Langford's offer," Louis said eventually. "Of course he had. You always hear everything," I murmured. "I try to," he replied. "But with you, it's different." I glanced at him. He was looking ahead, not at me. But his voice had changed. Softer, careful. "You don't need Veritas anymore," he said, "and I won't pretend that what we did to you, what they did, doesn't make it tempting to leave." I didn't interrupt. I wanted to hear it. All of it. "I know you can walk away," he continued, "and I'd respect you if you did. But," that pause. That single second where silence meant more than words. "I'd like you to stay," he finished. I stopped walking. He turned to face me. "With you here," he said slowly, "this place feels different, lighter. Like maybe we're not just building things. Maybe we're rebuilding the way we do it." My throat tightened. I hadn't expected that. He wasn't saying don't leave. He wasn't saying I need you. He wasn't even saying I'm in love with you. What he was saying was deeper. "Things come alive around you," he said quietly. And I believed him. Back in the office the next morning, I stood in the middle of the old conference room, the one where I'd once collapsed, in another life, in another timeline. Only this time I was standing tall. When the department heads gathered, I laid it out plainly. "I'm not leaving," I said. "But I'm not playing the same game." They looked confused. Curious. I explained the proposal, an internal incubator. Open to junior staff, interns, and unrecognized talent. Minimal red tape. Direct access to mentorship. Merit-based pitches. "Veritas doesn't need another layer of politics," I said. "It needs a space for ideas to breathe before they get strangled." A pause. Then Louis spoke. "I support this." That was all it took. Later that evening, as I was updating the incubator doc, Louis passed my desk. He didn't stop. He just left something beside my keyboard. A small black notebook. On the cover, one word embossed in gold. "Build." I opened it. Inside, a note in his handwriting. "You didn't just fix the system. You gave it a soul again. L." And for the first time in 2 lives, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be heard. I was already speaking. And finally, the world was listening. The walls were still glass, but this time they reflected something different. No more borrowed desk. No more folding chair. No more badges with intern printed in apologetic font. Now, there was my name on the door. My own office. My own voice finally echoed back. The sunlight filtered through the blinds in golden stripes, cutting across the whiteboard I hadn't wiped in days. On it, flow diagrams, ideas from yesterday's team session, and a small sketch in the corner. A light bulb with a heart inside it. One of the junior interns had drawn it during brainstorming and looked embarrassed when I laughed out loud. I hadn't erased it. Behind my desk, above the shelves, hung a poster I'd made myself on the day the incubator officially launched. "Nobody hears a whisper unless it burns." And mine had burned. Quietly, relentlessly, until they had no choice but to see the fire. The knock was soft. One single rap, then a pause. I already knew who it was. He didn't wait for permission. He never did. Louis stepped inside, the door whispering closed behind him. He said nothing. Just crossed the room, set a coffee mug on my desk, ceramic chipped on one side, and met my eyes. There was no question in his expression. No permission-seeking. Only a quiet understanding. He didn't need to say thank you. He didn't need to say anything. This was our rhythm now. I wrapped my hands around the mug, still warm. "Dark roast?" I asked. He nodded once. No cream. You remember. Always did. We didn't smile. We didn't need to. Because it wasn't about grand confessions or romantic crescendos. It was about this. The silence that felt full, not empty. The weight of being known, not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd become. I turned back to my screen as he moved to leave. Before he reached the door, I said, "Hey." He glanced back. "I'm glad you're still here." His voice was quiet. "So am I." Then he was gone. And I was left alone in a room I had built, not with vengeance, but with purpose. Not to prove I was right, but to choose for once what I wanted. I leaned back in the chair that now belonged to me, sipped my coffee, and let the quiet settle. In another life, I died trying to be heard, trying to be enough, trying to be chosen. In this one, I chose myself, and that changed everything.